Hello, STEM Nation. Jeff here, and welcome to episode number 82 of STEM on Fire, where we interview practicing professionals in the area of science, technology, engineering, and math to help guide students interested in STEM careers. If you like what you hear, please share it with a friend. Now let's get fired up today with our guest, Mel, and I hope our chat will help ignite your passion towards a STEM career. Mel is a consulting engineer in the water industry and started with a bachelor's in French language and literature, and then went on a couple years later for her bachelor's and master's in civil and environmental engineering in 2014. Welcome to the show, Mel. Fill in any gaps and share a bit of your personal life.
Thank you for having me. I'm really happy to be here, Jeff. As you mentioned, I started out my education in a very different place than engineering, and some people think that that's strange, or they think that, it doesn't... People think that the language and communications piece doesn't really fit with engineering. So when I started in school, I actually wasn't familiar with engineering as a career or a profession. I grew up in a really small town. I didn't see a lot of different professions other than what my parents were connected to. So my dad was in the military. My mother taught primary education. And I just didn't see the world of business, and I didn't see the world of engineering in front of me. So when I went to university, I'd say I was pretty ill-equipped to make a good decision as to what to study and, to make any good career decisions. And I found that the counselors weren't really able to help with that decision making either. So I think I did what a lot of students might do. I left myself undeclared for a major as long as I could. And I ended up with a lot of language hours, and I felt like, well, I better finish something. So I guess I'll finish this language degree. So that wasn't really planned out. At that time in my life, I still didn't really have any connection to the engineering world. After I earned my first degree, I went to work in emergency management. So I was working on emergency response and disaster response. And after a few years of that, I knew that I wanted to do something science and math related, but I wasn't sure what that should look like for a career. What I actually did was I went on to the Bureau of Labor Statistics Occupational Outlook Handbook, and I looked for careers that were combining math and science and had a good outlook long term for the career. Yeah.
So Mel, how did you, so I listen to what you're saying and how you progressed and didn't have a whole lot of guidance. And then how did you determine that you liked the math and science side after your literature degree and you're out working? How did you determine that?
Well, ironically, through reading. So I was reading a lot of nonfiction, and I wouldn't say that I was really good at learning a second language. I think it's really difficult to do that once you're an adult, and I didn't grow up learning, knowing or learning a second language. So it's not like that was something that went really well for me. The communications piece that I picked up with that was definitely a big part of my skill set in the emergency and disaster management space that I worked in. But I got to a point where I really felt like I could do what I wanted to do if I set my mind to it. And so I think that was the key shift for me. When I was young, when I got out of high school, I had extremely low self-confidence, and it took success in the professional world for me to gain that confidence to say, you know what, I can do whatever I want if I just put my mind to it. And so that was what helped me make the decision to go back to school in this STEM space.
How did you hone in on math and science? Had you always had an interest in that?
I had definitely always had an interest in science. I was more intimidated by the math, but I realized that was because I just didn't have, when I was young, I just didn't have any real excellent training or teachers in that space. So I guess I figured out that that issue wasn't me, and that if I wanted to be good at it, I could go and apply myself. So I used tutors as much as I could when I went back to school for engineering, and that got me through,
All right, thanks, Mel. So I get it. For students that are in the similar situation that you are, that maybe not be getting some guidance, what are some things that you think they should be aware of, or how could they go off and get help to figure out what they could do in, say, the STEM profession?
My recommendation to younger people is to think about not only your passions, but also think about what is going to fit into the context of the life that I want, right? So what kind of life do I want? What's important to me in terms of, do I want to travel for my job? Do I want to definitely not travel for my job? Do I want to have the ability to work from home? Do I want a high income earning potential? Is being in a certain geographic location really important to me? Those types of things, just general life things. I think it's important to give some thought to those aspects, and then look for careers in your interest areas or your passions that can accommodate some of those things.
Yeah, Mel, I agree with that. I mean, my son, he's in a STEM, he's in college right now going for a STEM degree in computer engineering. And he started out looking at chemical engineering. And I said, well, look to see where the jobs are for chemical engineering. And he started looking around, and he saw that there's a high concentration in different areas of the country. I'm like, okay, well, would you want to live there? Because that's, more than likely where you're going to end up getting a position. And he's like, you know what? No, I really don't want to live there. So I'm like, well, then, maybe you want to look at something else. I mean, you can always get a job kind of anywhere with any STEM profession, but the high concentration is like, well, that's probably a high likelihood. So you have to listen to what Mel is saying about, you have to take everything into account. Think about what you really want, and then kind of hone your path, in that direction.
Yeah, if I could add something to that, I agree with you. I think that was great advice for your son. I think the other thing to just point out here is that there are people out there who have one passion. There is, a topic or a subject area that they are just completely enamored with, and that will be their path. That was not the case for me. I have a variety of different interests. I'm incredibly interested in biology, and indeed, when I went back to school the second time, I initially thought that I would do environmental science or something in that realm. And what I did was I looked at the BLS Occupational Outlook Handbook and also a couple of other sources. The Sea Grant source, I think that's put together by NOAA. That may still be out there on the internet. So looking at those two things and some other sources, I learned that the career prospects, particularly earning potential with that degree, were not very good. And so for me, I couldn't justify the expense of going to school for that degree to only have that sort of capped earning potential. That it just was too risky to me. And so I investigated more and then landed on engineering, because and let me add this too. So this is something that I didn't have any line of sight to previously until I got into this field. So engineering is like geology or being a doctor or a lawyer. It's a professional program that leads to a professional licensure. And this has, I don't want to say more prestige, but it has more professional prospects than degrees that aren't like this, right? So you've probably talked about...
When you're saying like engineering in general versus, so like if you went for biology or biological engineering, are you talking about differences between those two?
Correct. So I think that's a good example. Also, the difference between environmental science or environmental engineering.
Okay.
If you do an ABET accredited degree in environmental engineering, you are setting yourself up for a professional path of becoming a professional licensed engineer in that field. If you get a degree in environmental science, that's a very open-ended, not specific degree. The degrees are going to vary greatly by university, and it doesn't lend itself to a professional license.
Yeah, and I think that's important. If somebody out there is saying, well, I don't really care about that. Well, that's fine, but you have to make sure that you have all the information so you can make the right decision. Not that you go down just the environmental science and it's like, well, hold it, I thought I could go do this, and it's like, well, no, you really can't because you can't get your license for it.
Right.
It's good to know that up front. And I'll look for some of those links, Mel, and put those into the show notes that you mentioned and see if they are still out there. And I completely agree with your advice, Mel, of, my daughter came to me and she's like, hey, I like math, but what could I do? I don't really like the physics. I'm like, here, go off and research these types of degrees. And I'm like, but also make sure that what you're heading down, you can actually make money doing it. Because you go through college, get something that's really enjoyable, but if you can't make money doing it, it's really kind of hard to succeed out in the real world.
Absolutely.
So we're gonna pivot a little bit here, Mel, and we're gonna talk about getting through college. So you went through college kind of twice. What's some advice that you'd give to high school students, juniors, seniors, heading off to college to help them be successful?
My advice to students in high school is don't wait until the last minute. So I think that students they don't need to figure out what major they want to study right away, but as soon as you're in high school, you need to be active in different kinds of organizations. You need to volunteer some of your time. You need to do those extracurricular activities. And those things show the programs that you might want to get into, that you can dedicate yourself to an interest, and it shows that you can commit to something and follow through. So in addition to good grades, I think that kind of activity and involvement is incredibly important, whether it's something related to a math club or honor society or being involved with sports. Those things can play into getting a scholarship or getting into a program that you want to be in. So that's one piece of advice. Don't wait. I think my other big piece of advice that I would want to get out there is take a break if you need to. If you're not ready to make a decision about your career path, take a break, work for a while before going to college, and also investigate trade jobs. There are many trade jobs out there that pay really well. Some of them you can do immediately after high school. Some of them you can do after earning a basic trade certificate. And there's a lot of room to move up in those fields, particularly if you have any kind of natural leadership acumen, certainly communications acumen. It can be easy to move up in those spaces because we're missing a lot of people. So I think, like electrician is one that people might hear about more often than others. But one in my space that I see is water and wastewater treatment plant operators. The industry desperately needs more operators, and it's a great place where people can grow. So I would say, an entry-level sort of operator can earn somewhere around $40,000 a year. And then as the years go on and you learn more and you progress and you're responsible for more aspects of a plant, your salary can grow to, as high as $100,000. And there's different types of places you can work doing that, right? So you can work not just for a municipality, but every single manufacturing facility has to treat their wastewater, and they have to have an operator to run that system and make sure that everything is running properly to be in compliance with They're environmental rules. And so they're important positions too. They have an impact on not only human health, but also protecting the environment.
And STEM Nation, so Mel hit on a very important point there, right? The trades. And also, I don't know when it started happening, but not going to college became kind of a stigma. It's like, oh, if you go to a 2-year tech school, it's like, oh, well, you weren't good enough to go to college. I'm going to say that the kids that go to tech school and get a trade like plumbing or like electrician, or I was talking to somebody the other day getting some pizza, and they're actually an elevator repair person, and they're like, we can't find people to fix elevators, to install elevators, and these jobs are paying like $90,000 a year for a trade. So, students, if you're listening to this going, I'm not sure I really want to go to college. I really want hands-on, and I really like doing the trades, but there's a stigma. I'm like, forget the stigma. Go do that, because there's so many kids that go to college. They get degrees. You can't make any money with half the degrees you get from college, and then you're struck with all this debt and no career path. So eliminate that stigma. Go get a 2-year tech degree if that's really what interests you, and just go do it.
Yeah, and I think the important thing there is to let go of what other people may or may not think about what you're doing. Your path is your path, and you get to choose what is best for you to do. So, what would you rather do? Have a job in the trades that is immediately paying you well above average, or go to college for 4 or 5 years and have tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt, and get out and realize, oh, I can't find a professional job because, I have a degree in language. I got lucky with what I did. My first degree did not lend itself to any profession or job that would make good money. I ended up in a decent job because of my network, and that was really it.
That's all good conversation, Mel. Appreciate that. So any questions out there in STEM Nation, please reach out to me, ping me on LinkedIn, or reach out to Mel if you're looking for some advice. Mel, we're going to close out here. If you could share a parting piece of guidance for STEM Nation, and then we'll say goodbye.
I really appreciate your question. My advice for younger students, whether in high school or early college, would be to take a deep breath, investigate some ways to cultivate mindfulness, and take the time to think about what life priorities are most important to you. Those things should be guiding beacons when you're looking at making important career decisions. And, it's nearly impossible for your average 18-year-old to make a career decision that they're going to be happy with for the rest of their life. I couldn't do it. So it's okay to course correct. You can make changes later if you decide you've gone down the wrong path. That's totally possible. But what I think I would recommend avoiding is avoiding what I did. It's better to, in your early years, make a decision that sets you up for some kind of success, whether that's a trade job or a degree that leads you to a specific professional path where there's upcoming opportunities. Like you mentioned your son doing computer engineering. That's a great example. It's better to have that opportunity and course correct later than to end up in a lot of college debt and not have the opportunity. That makes it so much more difficult to change your direction later, because you just won't have the resources to do it unless you were born into an extremely wealthy family.
Absolutely, Mel. That's great advice, and thank you for all that you have shared today. And thanks for being on.
Thank you so much for having me, Jeff.
You're welcome. I hope you enjoyed that chat today with Mel. You can head over to STEMonfire.com, subscribe to the email list to keep up with the latest happenings, and be sure to subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcast player. And please share it with a friend.